Morning, Judith. You are muted at the moment.
Good morning, Skip and all. I have a dear friend from Boulder, and she is a Jung depth explorer. So she's here with me, and her name is Lynn.
Hi, Lynn.
Morning.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So we are live on YouTube, and this is being recorded. Okay, and Patrick is asking me, he's at a public van, and it's very loud. That's why he won't be using his video or audio. Okay, Patrick, that's fine. You can just hang in here and listen, and if you can join us another time, that would be great. That's entirely up to you anyway. Let's see here. We have gathered a few people on YouTube. And so, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Art. Nice to see you. We are going into Liber Secundus of the Red Book by C.G. Jung. The reader's edition is what I'm holding in my hand. And we have been reading and commenting on it as we go. I suspect that Jordan Hoggard will not join us today. I had a missed call from him, but I didn't get a message from him. So, but I suspect the fact that he was calling me suggests he might be out of town. So we're just going to go with what we got. My voice is in the process of dying, so I'll go as well as I can today. So this is a new active imagination that C.G. Jung is having. There's a footnote at the beginning of it which says the title of the chapter is called One of the Lowly, and the handwritten draft has Third Adventure, and the corrected draft has, quote, the rogue, unquote, which is then covered over with paper on the corrected draft. And this active imagination is happening on December 29th, 1913. So it is about a week into Dr. Jung's active imaginations, which began the Red Book period. And one of the big events occurred on Christmas of 1913. And up until this time, he's been having visions, which he later understood to be prefigurations of World War I, which were happening to him between October and December of 1913. And then around Christmas time, he began to have these visions. He later understood the visions to be connections to the collective unconscious. He realized that these visions were in the ether for everyone, and they led to him identifying the collective unconscious. And but active imagination is another one of his innovations, basically, although others had them. The Divine Comedy, for example, is thought to be an active imagination. Hi, Michelle. Nice to see you today. And so I will begin, and I'll stop when my voice doesn't work anymore. So this is One of the Lowly. In the following night, I found myself wandering once more in a homely snow-covered country. A gray evening sky covers the sun. The air is moist and frosty. Someone who does not look trustworthy has joined me. Most notably, he has only one eye and a few scars on his face. He is poor and dirtily clothed, a tramp. He has a black stubble beard that has not seen a razor for a long time. I have a good walking stick for any eventuality. It's damn cold, he remarks after a while, and I agree. After a longer pause, he asks, "Where are you going?" Okay, now let's remember that this character represents a part of Dr. Jung's own psyche, and this is how it presents itself to him. And so, carrying on, "Where are you going?" he says. I am going to the next village where I plan to stay overnight. I'd like to do that too, but we'll hardly manage to get a bed. Have you no money? Well, let us see. Are you out of work? Yes, times are bad. Until a few days ago, I was working for a locksmith, but then he had no more work. Now I'm traveling and looking for work. Wouldn't you work for a farmer? There is always a shortage of farm labor. Working for a farmer doesn't suit me. That means getting up early in the morning. The work is hard and the wages are low. But it's always much more beautiful in the country than in the town. It's boring in the country. One meets nobody. Well, but there are also villagers. But there is no mental stimulation. The farmers are clods. I look at him astonished. What he still wants mental stimulation better than he honestly earn his keep. And when he has done that, he can think of stimulation. Now, let's keep in mind that this is also a representative of Jung's shadow. And so Jung's shadow doesn't like the idea of farm work or getting up early to do farm work. And he doesn't like boredom. And let's see, what else do we see here? I was working for a locksmith. Okay, well, that may indicate that he was working for a key. His unconscious was working for a key to unlock the secrets of the psyche that he was getting into at that time. He did not know it at that time. He didn't know what was happening at that time. And so what this locksmith might indicate is that Jung's shadow was looking for a key about what was happening with him. And Judith, that was a rather pregnant shake of the head no. So could you elaborate, please?
No, I was actually saying something to Lynn. She was wondering if complete non sequitur. So
okay. So you weren't disagreeing with my analysis. Disagreeing.
I'm appreciating your helping us unpack this.
Okay. Okay, thank you. All right. And so he had also referred to the villagers, and the villagers may be other parts of Jung's psyche that he hasn't encountered yet. So at this point in 1913, Dr. Jung had broken with Freud. He was in a state. He was in his midlife crisis. He wasn't really sure what he was going to do or what he was going to be writing. Essentially, all of his collected works are written after this time, after 1913. And so he is basically just trying to get his feet under himself based on being, he's a made psychiatrist at that point. He knows what he's doing as a psychiatrist, but he's trying to figure out what's going on with him in these active imaginations, and then how to interpret it. And so anyway, there was this exchange about mental stimulation. Let me just look at the comments for a moment on YouTube. Greetings from London. Thank God we can talk about Carl Jung without the confused and dysfunctional musings of Jordan Peterson. Okay, and I hope you mean Jordan Peterson and not Jordan Hoggard. Jordan Peterson is a psychologist who is married to the logos, the rational side of the world. So he's really more of a Freudian analyst, although he apparently Jung impressed him a few times, and so he name drops Jung a lot, but often it's sort of out there. Jordan Peterson is a brilliant man. I don't want to detract from him at all, but in my experience with listening to his work, he seems to focus on the logical side of things, whereas Jung focused on the irrational side of things. And so when Peterson finds a nice quote, he repeats the quote and then he drops Jung's name, but it doesn't make him a Jungian, not by any means. So I'm going to go on with the stimulation now. And Jung is astonished that this fellow that he's with, this untrustworthy fellow, is still interested in stimulation. So Jung says, but tell me, what kind of mental stimulation is there in the city? You can go to the cinema in the evenings. That's great, and it's cheap. You get to see everything that happens in the world. I have to think of hell, where there are also cinemas for those who despise this institution on earth and did not go there because everyone else found it to their taste. So here Jung is thinking about the shadow side of cinema and the shadow side of what it means. Then he says, what interested you most about the cinema? One sees all sorts of stunning feats. There was one man who ran up houses, another carried his head, under his arm. Another even stood in the middle of a fire and wasn't burnt. Yes, it's really remarkable the things that people can do. And that's what this fellow calls mental stimulation. What? But wait, that does seem remarkable. Didn't the saints also carry their heads under their arms? Didn't St. Francis and St. Ignatius levitate? And what about the three men in the fiery furnace? Isn't it a blasphemous idea to consider the acta sanctorum as historical cinema? Oh, today's miracles are simply somewhat less mythical than technical. I regard my companion with feeling. He lives the history of the world. And I? Certainly it's very well done. Did you see anything else like this? Yes, I saw how the King of Spain was murdered. But he wasn't murdered at all. Well, that doesn't matter. In that case, it was one of those damned capitalist kings. At least they got one of them. If all of them were taken out, the people would be free. Not a word more, dare I say. William Tell, a work of Friedrich Schiller, the man is standing right in the thick of it, in the stream of his heroic story. One who announces the murder of the tyrant to his sleeping people. I'm going to read this footnote and then go back and look at a couple of others. So the footnote about William Tell, 1805, Friedrich Schiller dramatized the revolt of the Swiss cantons against the rule of the Austrian Habsburg Empire at the beginning of the 14th century, which led to the founding of the Swiss Confederation. In Act 4, Scene 3, William Tell kills Gessler, the imperial representative. Strussi, the ranger, announces, quote, "The tyrant of the land is dead. From now henceforth, we suffer no oppression. We are free men," unquote. And that was from a translation by W. Mainland from the University of Chicago Press, 1973. There's a couple of other footnotes here that are also relevant. The emblem of the city of Zurich bears this motif, showing the late 3rd century martyrs Felix Regula and Exuperantius. Let's see. I don't see that footnote. This next one says it appears to be a reference to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Daniel 3 from Nebuchadnezzar ordered to be placed, whom Nebuchadnezzar ordered to be placed into a furnace for refusing to worship the golden idol that he had erected. They were unscathed by the fire, which led Nebuchadnezzar to decree that he would cut up anyone who henceforth spoke against their God. And the other footnote, the Acta Sanctorum, is a collection of the lives and legends of the saints arranged according to their feast days, published by Jesuits in Belgium, known as the Bollandist Fathers. It began in 1643 and ran to 63 folio volumes. Okay, so here Jung is recognizing traditional legends within what's happening to him in this active imagination. And that's Shamdasani's point in these footnotes, that Jung makes these references like Acta Sanctorum, and he's recognizing that in this active imagination that's occurring, he's actually having experiences from the hero's journey that is common in mythology. And so we've done William Tell. We're in the last full paragraph at the bottom of page 234. Jordan. Good morning, Jordan. Okay, so we have arrived at the inn, a country tavern, a reasonably clean parlor. A few men sit with beer in the corner. I am recognized as a gentleman and led into the better corner, where a checkered cloth covers the end of a table. The other sits down at the far end of the table, and I decide to have him served a proper evening meal. He is already looking at me full of expectation and hunger with his one eye. Okay, so again, Jung is deciding to honor his shadow being the lowly one, the one-eyed guy that he's having as a vision, and so he's deciding whether to feed him or not. And by feed him here, we may not be meaning food, but rather give him the time of day or keep him down. But he's, at least at this point, Jung is sympathetic to this shadow figure who, at this point in his career, I don't think he's even started to talk about the shadow per se. Okay. The shadow starts to come up later in Jung's writings. But here, Jung's having the raw experience of a vision of his shadow that's emanating. It's a psychogenic experience that he's having, and it's with a part of himself. And now, with 2020 hindsight and the benefit of 100 years of people's commentary on Jung's work, we can say, oh, Jung was talking about the shadow here. But when Dr. Jung was going through this experience, he didn't have a clue really what it was that he was experiencing. He did recognize that there were that mythology offered him something, that it had certain repetitions, but I don't think at this point he really appreciated the significance of it all for psychotherapy and so on. He was just going through his midlife crisis. This was the very beginning of it, and so he's in a kind of confused state, I would say, and he's decided to just go with the flow. He feels he can manage the flow, which goes for another 5 years that he had the visioning experiences. But he hasn't really started to comment on it yet. And of course, let's see, there's a quote at the end of the beginning of the Red Book, which is a very famous Jungian quote, which I want to read now, just so you can appreciate the significance of this. And Judas, please feel free to pipe up if you don't agree with me. But the quote is, "The years of which I have spoken to you, when I pursued the inner images, were the most important time of my life. Everything else is to be derived from this. It began at that time, and the later details hardly matter anymore. My entire life consisted in elaborating what had burst forth from the unconscious and flooded me with an enigmatic stream and threatened to break me. That was the stuff and material for more than only one life. Everything later was merely the outer classification and scientific elaboration and the integration into life. But the numinous beginning, which contained everything, was then." I'm sorry, I get very emotional about it because I had my own experience, not the same experience, but my own experience for 8 months back in 1993. And I can relate to what Dr. Jung is saying precisely. I mean, I totally get it. And I always find it very interesting to be looking at when in his lifetime Dr. Jung was saying these things and when he was writing these things. And Dr. Shamdasani has very professionally provided us with the actual dates that this was occurring. And So anyway, Jordan, did you have any comment before I go on here?
Well, I appreciate the time in his life, around 42. I think three things. It's the 10,000 hour rule, which basically is about 20 years. You're steeped in a career. You're no longer learning to dance. You're just dancing, so to speak. So at this point, instead of the child becoming the parent of the man, then the man is becoming the parent of the rest of his life. So I find the midlife crisis is somewhat of a myth, and it's usually a crisis when someone hasn't reached adolescence in the late teens, early 20s. Yeah. But then at 42, it's actually our not just responsibility. I think it's a natural urge to then birth the rest of your life. So you self-initiate. And what's interesting is astrologically, around 42, he's coming up to 7 years from his Chiron return. And Chiron is Kronos, Saturn's son. So then the son eclipses the father. So at that point, he's working.
This is actually, he's 38 at this point.
Right. So he's coming up to that 42 point, which is 7 years in front of the son eclipsing the father completely, where father becomes colleague, father becomes family, but not ruler. And so in that sense, he's coming over the life liminal, I call it, horizon, where he is the one living, rather than complexes of mother or father. Those are now not complexes typically, but influences, powerful ones, but they start to get forgotten and not just unconsciously driving him. And I think the third part is at 42, astrologically, transiting Neptune, which is very much boundarylessness, Poseidon, the ocean, squares or braces against your natal Neptune. So what was nebulous, what was unconscious, what was not knowing, in a sense, then sees itself for the first time. And so you can look to then go into the unconscious consciously and dance with your shadow. And then I think the shadow becomes not so much, the things you don't like about yourself. It's just literally the unconscious that's continually in formation into consciousness. Is, I think, in a nutshell, my kind of tripartite triplicate kind of comment of just the age 42 is pretty loaded, I think, in life. I'd be curious from Judith's perspective about what she sees around that 38 to 42 timeline in people's development.
Yes, especially in those years, I think we are in a bit more of a delayed maturation period now, 120 years later. So what was happening, I think, for people developmentally then, and being at the forefront of that, at the frontier edge of expanding into that and literally to receive, I don't see often people having now more in their 50s.
Delayed, right.
That it's where they actually go, where I have been just living my lockstep life. And it's kind of horrifying in a certain way and wakeful. It's wakeful. And I feel that that's some of what he's allowing here. And like Skip, you said, he's not making meaning of it yet, which actually, if as a psychotherapist, if I can help people stay in that openness, support them to stay in the openness without having to make, well, it means this, and now I have to do that. And again, as you said, Skip, the logos, go to logos, but just allow it. Can you hang, sorry for my slangy word, but can you hang out there? Can you literally just stay and keep opening? There's something revealing, and often people get terrified at what we call this midlife time. They get.
I appreciate.
Go ahead.
The verb.
Sorry.
I call judgment a prison.
What do you call?
It's an invisible prison. Judgment. Whenever you make a judgment, it's an invisible prison that you set up for yourself.
I would agree, and I think at 42, I love Judith using the verb to hang out, because at that point, that's where I found structure without stricture. And in a sense, that judgy prison, as you put it, Michelle, was to me architecture. But there's so much creativity in architecture, and it's the arche techne. Arche is the Greek inception, the first spark in classic Greek. Techne is the making, the putting together. So you get to create, to make. Well, to create is formless, and to make is giving form to the formless. But at that point, that prison of judgy, I started losing judgment and just keeping discernment. I mean, my radar, my awareness. So,
can you do that as an INFJ?
Oh,
Can INFJ do that?
Well, I think what happens is I'm no longer 4 letters. At that point, my life was ask me again tomorrow. And I think what happens is the labels end up being somewhat pseudoscience, and they're self-fulfilling if you allow them, just like a diagnosis. Now, some are correct, some work, but I think it's more of an intensely extreme cases. And like Judith so aptly put, you see it more in the 50s. And I think in the 30s, it's like people happen early and people happen late, because I think there's a lack of rite of passage. And I mean, 30% of the people don't care. 30% of the people are engaged. And then you get a 30% that's partially activist, but won't say, so you get a whole lot of, you really don't know what's going on in the undercurrents. But at my table, I see the 30s and I see the 50s. And then the 40s are kind of in the, is it okay what I'm doing here? You get the interrogative where it's like a child still asking for permission, which I'm not shaming that. It's kind of great, because then it's like, yeah, you're now birthing the rest of your life. You don't ask yourself for permission. It's, does it resonate, is about all you ask. So Skip.
Okay. I want to get back to the text here, but I do want to read one comment from YouTube, which was, I have a from Jonty. I have a subterranean terrorist who, with one eye, who believes he's a freedom fighter. If I feed him, he leaves my weekends in ruins.
Yeah, there you go. That's my response to you.
Yeah. Just the additional comment I wanted to make here is that what is really astounding about this book is that Dr. Jung had the prescience to write it down and keep it carefully for 16 years. He worked on it for 16 years. And it was only when, and he didn't know what was happening. He said, I wasn't sure where my grounding was. He couldn't make the right connection. And then in 1928-29, Richard Wilhelm came to him, Richard Wilhelm came to him with The Secret of the Golden Flower, which was a Chinese text that Wilhelm had translated. And it was then when he saw the parallels between the Chinese perspective and his own perspective that he realized he was okay and he could keep going. And ironically, that number of years is almost exactly what happened to me, because I had my experience without benefit of being a psychiatrist. And I put it away. It emerged in the form of a novel, and I put it away in my drawer for 16 years because I didn't know what I had and I couldn't address it. And finally, when the Red Book came out and I started to read it and I recognized what was happening to Dr. Jung, I said, wow, if this could happen to the greatest psychiatrist, psychologist of the 20th century, then I guess it's okay if it happened to me. And that made a huge difference for me personally in my life.
I find it interesting too, your Chinese background and bringing up Jung's Chinese piece, because my concept of both and instead of either or and don't waste trouble. If I just look at the Chinese character for crisis, it's a combination of the two glyphs of danger and opportunity.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that you probably intuitively in your Chinese language school, in the military, probably started to have that both and poured into you without realizing.
I was exposed to it very early. And, one of the important things that I learned in the early 1980s when I was working as a business executive in Japan was that I read an article about the fact that there had been a man in Osaka, I think, who had had a stroke, and he had lost access to his left brain. And what that did to him was that it made it so he could only read kanji. He could not read hiragana or katakana, which are both syllabaries, but they're logos oriented. Okay. And so he could envision things till the cows come home, but he couldn't put it all together because he didn't have the logos part that would allow him to put it together. And so suddenly I started to understand the interplay between the left and right brain because of that story that I saw, 40 years ago, more about. And of course, at that point, I had already studied Mandarin for a year in Defense Language Institute, about 12 years before that. So I was living in Japan, so I was also studying the same characters in Japanese. So I know them in both Japanese and Chinese. So, and that's an interesting juxtaposition. But let me go on with this reading.
I think before you do, really quickly, that experience reminds me of the old joke of, left-handed people, they're the only ones in their right mind. So, because they can see past the expectation because they're seeing what is instead of what is being told to them in a way. So, yeah.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
Hi, Amala.
So I remember last week we were Nietzsche was brought up, and I feel like in this chapter, it reminds me of part 3 in The Penguin Beyond Good and Evil, where on the prejudice of philosophers, he says, quote, just as the act of being born plays no part in the procedure and progress of heredity, so being conscious is in no decisive sense the opposite of the instinctive. Most of a philosopher's conscious thinking is secretly directed and compelled into a definite channels by his instincts. So therefore, I think what he means is that when we are born at birth, our minds are like a tabla rasa, plane. And then as we develop, we are challenged with ethos and interpersonal perception of moral inventory. So in this particular chapter of the Red Book, what I really like in the Liber Secundus is that Jung is basically right now in this phase, because what I believe in is that we go through different phases and stages in life. So as we mature, our thinking either becomes more rational or logical, or we just stay the same and our thinking is as it is. So I'm very excited about this chapter because he talks about death, and I'm very interested in that.
Yeah.
That kind of aligns with Jonty's comment too about his weekend. I mean, with Nietzsche bringing that in, because Nietzsche's famous quote of, when fighting monsters, be careful not to become one. So it's that
it reminds me of the school children I'm teaching right now who are all under 11 years old, and they already know everything. And we simply have to activate those things. And they're basically, our education system forces them to forget. It's really frustrating. I believe that art should be taught to children, should be taught in elementary school to access their creative side, because once they get into middle school, now they end up working with the digital palette and all sorts of logosy ways of approaching art, which basically turns them into graphic designers or graphic artists of some sort. But it doesn't teach them anything about their own creativity. And I believe that has to be activated early. So I had an interview.
Do you have any tips, Skip? Do you have any tips how to activate the creativity?
Yeah, we need to activate the creative side.
But do you have any tips?
Do I have any tips? Yes, I have lots of tips, but well, I can show you some examples if I should. Since we've diverged for a moment, I'll give you very quickly a précis of some of these.
I think what's most important about what you're doing is not activating the creativity. It's showing them that it has value and that don't lose that, because I think kids are naturally connected. The problem is adults are often disconnected. So an adult perspective would say, oh, we need to activate the children early. That's a projection. It's a confession. I think that a lot of adults aren't connected. And so I think that keeping the children's value of that dreamland, that connection, it's not fantasy or wishful thinking. That's intuitive development. And that's a muscle that you can, intuition is funky. That's why it's
I do want to address one thing, though, also about philosophy, that philosophy is logos. The philosophy is largely mansplaining stuff that's happening. Okay, all of philosophy.
That's why we know God is a woman, because the Bible's a bunch of just mansplaining about God and what it is. And every philosopher is just infinite in their own little compartment.
And once we realize that it's just mansplaining, then we see why men and women don't get along, because it's like me being a 99% intuitive. I cannot see what others get. I don't know what other people don't understand, because I get it. Okay. When somebody tells me about something, I just grok it. And then I just have no clue why they don't get it. Okay.
Yeah, the logical is the mechanic in the auto shop has to take the car off, whereas the intuitive can work on the car at 220 miles an hour without getting in the way of the driver.
Well, my explanation of this is a sensing person. You can show them 1,000 trees and they won't believe there's a forest. An intuitive person, you can show 3 trees and they assume there's a forest. Okay, so that's where I am. I see all the implications of something instantly. It's like the first time I saw this image that Tim Holmes did. It's called Returning the Nails, and it's the image of the Virgin Mary returning the nails to the Roman authorities, because iron was a strategic item in Christ's time. And so the Roman, Tim just said, well, the Roman authorities probably asked for their nails back. And actually, this is a postcard that Tim sent me, which maybe some of you don't know, everybody on my advanced reading group does, but this is what Tim said to me on the back of the postcard. He said, "Dear Skep, it is said that after the Tiananmen massacre, the Chinese government sent out bills to the families of the protesters for the cost of their execution. Whether true or not, this is the cast of human evil. In researching early metallurgy, I discovered that in Christ's time, iron was a strategic material. I imagine if nails were used for crucifixions, the families of the victims would be charged with returning the nails to the government. This image is Mary post-crucifixion." And so this is basically, I mean, when I saw this, I couldn't move for an hour. The first time I saw it, I was decapitated, because it is so much the essence of the distinction between the logos and the eros. Okay, because the logos is demanding the nails back. Okay, that's the logos. And it's Mary saying, "Here, you can have your nails. I'll take the future with me." Okay.
Yeah, Eros giving the logos back.
Side. Yeah.
I don't need that.
That's very shocking, but I'm not surprised because of, the times that people lived in and the kind of thinking that they had, so therefore the kind of knowledge or understanding that they had of the world around them, in this sense of I don't understand. Sometimes I know when I take my son to church on Sundays, I always tell my son there are two distinct people that go to church. And I want him to know that there are some people who go to church and they look at Jesus on the cross and they say, "Thank God Jesus is on the cross." And then there are people who look at Jesus on the cross and they say, "I would have died for Jesus Christ." So I want my son to know that, because there are two distinct people that go to church. Some people go there to say, "Here, take my money. I have confessed." And then you have some people who actually live the word, and not necessarily like devoted completely. They could just be someone who is a humbled person who does not necessarily, doesn't identify as Catholic or Christian or Coptic. But, there are two people, because after all, Judas was a traitor. And
Right. Well, I want to go back to the reading.
yeah.
Maybe. Wait a minute. I'm having a hard problem in my throat since February, and my allergist hasn't identified it, and so maybe it may be asthma. So I did have asthma as a young boy, and have a little bit of it. I've always had a little bit of it, but I may have kicked off an asthma storm. In my teaching, I have to learn about that. But anyway, I want to go back to this reading. And so we're on page 235. And so Jung is talking to his untrustworthy friend. He says, "Where did you lose your eye?" He, "In a brawl. But I also got my knife into the other fella pretty nicely. After that, he got 3 months. They gave me 6, but it was beautiful in prison. At the time the building was completely new, I worked in the locksmiths. There wasn't much to do, and yet there was enough to eat. Prison really isn't all that bad," unquote. I look around to make sure that no one is listening to me talking with a former convict, but no one seems to have noticed. I seem to have ended up in well-to-do company. Are there also prisons in hell for those who never saw the inside of one while they were alive? Incidentally, mustn't it be a peculiarly beautiful feeling to hit bottom in reality at least once, where there is no going down any further, but only upward beckons at best, where for once one stands before the whole height of reality?
I love that he's in prison studying locksmithing. It's that doesn't get any more tidy, to let yourself free.
Yeah.
Steal
And
yourself.
A lot of destitute people have, which is they commit some sort of petty offense to get themselves thrown into jail because it's quote unquote 3 hots and a cot.
Mm-hmm.
3 hot meals and a roof over your head.
Yeah.
And they know they can get that at least. Okay, so
I just wanted to add where he says this beautiful feeling of hitting rock bottom.
yeah.
That in the recovery world is called the pink cloud.
Uh-huh.
And it's a great feeling. The pink cloud. It usually lasts about, I guess that's why they tell you to go to 90 meetings in 90 days, because it usually only lasts about 90 days.
Uh-huh.
Which actually is a natural.
Michelle, the pink cloud happens after the bottom.
Yeah,
It's
when you decide to
hitting
turn your life, you
dark and rugged. Hitting
Yeah,
bottom.
Oh, wait a minute. One at a time, because I can't hear what either one of you is saying. Judith,
Oh,
you
yes,
were
it is
saying,
after the bottom when you pick. Yes.
okay, I couldn't hear what Judith said at
I'm
the
sorry,
beginning
I
of that
kinda-
exchange.
I kind of jumped in, but the bottom is that no place else to go. You're
Mhm.
down, you're looking up at reality as Jung says here, the height of reality.
Mhm.
And that, but the bottom is actually hard. And,
yes.
you know,
And the
Jung-
bottom, each bottom gets worse and worse. The bottom, whenever you're ready to stop digging, that can be your bottom. But if you ever think that that you've reached your bottom, it can always get worse.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It can,
You can also acclimate more to it, because rock bottom is a really strong stomp place to stand. And it's important to stomp there, literally, because it might have a basement. Okay, you fall through, but then you find the true rock bottom. The reality is you're at the bottom of the vessel. It's scoured. So you have a beautiful perspective. Everything looks better from there. I mean, just the 10 of swords and the tarot or the tower. But instead of world altering, ALTER, like everything coming down, after you do it, I think rather than getting worse, there becomes an experiential piece of world altering, ALTARING. And I call it blindsided T-bone by beauty, because what happens is it's beauty you don't know is beauty yet. And it's because it's startling, because it's new and different. And so in that sense, I think there's a misnomer, I think, in a lot of the step programs where, yeah, sure, always complete, never finished, lifelong. But the word never, I think, is toxically dangerous, because what happens is that imprisons you in that now, and that makes you live in the pool of your traumas that are incarcerated. Whereas it's our job, I think, to send them the rope to engage with them. And so I think that pink cloud piece, like Judith said, the rock bottom, and then the other experience. But I don't find the shaming behavior of be careful, it'll get worse. It's like, oh my Lord. I mean, that seems to be actually consciously terrorizing the people you're trying to heal. And I don't find that to be living. I find that to be living in fear. So I think it's important, but I think it's also important then to break free of those containers. Personally, I don't know what Judith's thought is with your clients, but at my table, I see people that after a year or so, they come back and they say, thanks for helping me see through the bullshit, but it wasn't bullshit then. And that's what you told me. It's like, no, that's good stuff, but that's not the end. Because I'll usually say I respect anyone searching for the truth, but if you tell me you found it, you get my abject disrespect.
Okay.
So, I mean, Judith.
you find your truth.
Yeah.
But I don't find it. So that's the thing.
Let's go on. Okay.
Yep, I have a question as well.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but it kind of reminds me of like Plato's cave, and I wonder
Mhm.
if maybe Jung was reading this literature, or like it somehow just came to his mind. And like this, because he also talks about the anima and animus. And so now I'm curious if he's like sort of trying to go toward like this, I'm not really sure, but for me, it's like very sadist for me, not Satanist, sadist, like, you know, with all of this, like imprisonment and stuff. The way that I'm interpreting it is not necessarily hitting rock bottom, but maybe being in a place of discomfort, you know, like when they say, get out of your comfort zone. So I'm sort of there mentally, not really like
Okay.
rock bottom, because rock bottom is kind of like losing everything.
Okay, well, this reading group is not about psychotherapy per se. And I think we're getting a little bit in the weeds of psychotherapy here. And I really want to get back to the reading as it is, because this is really, you know, honestly, this was written before the beginning of what we would call modern psychotherapy. And so this is just a raw experience that Dr. Jung was having in his psyche. And the visioning period of it was 5 years, but he wrote the Red Book for 16 years, and pulled it all together for 16 years, including all the imagery and so on. And I really want to keep focused on what is in this experience, his experience, because for me, it never gets old. And I know it never gets old at my depth. And so for people who may never have the time, the money, or the inclination to see a psychotherapist, I think it can be helpful. And so I don't want to get too far into the nuts and bolts of psychotherapy if we can avoid it. You know, it's not no reflection on anything that was said, but all right, Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, in respect of that, and I agree too. But going back literally to the text, I love that when he says, "Where there is no going down any further, but only upward beckons at best,"
Mhm.
and it's a question mark. So it doesn't have to do that, but it gives you the reduced amount of decisions to make. So in that time of trouble, it's, oh, there's the storm. Am I the eye in the storm? Okay, fine. Storm's no big deal. I'll lean into the dissonance. I won't waste trouble. But if you're in the storm, there are fewer decisions. Life is the decision. What do you need to do to stay alive? So I love this.
Yeah, well, the main decision is the one that Winston Churchill identified. When you're going through hell, keep going. That's the one. When you're going through hell, keep going. All right, I'm going to carry on here. I'm going to repeat what the figure said. He. So after that, there I was out on the street since they banished me. Then I went to France. It was lovely there. What demands beauty makes. Something can be learned from this man. I. Why did you have this brawl? He. It was over a woman. She was carrying his bastard, but I wanted to marry her. She was already due. After that, she didn't want to anymore. I haven't heard from her. I. How old are you now? He. I'll be 35 in spring. Once I find a proper job, we can get married right off. I'll find myself one, I will. There's something wrong with my lungs, though. Something wrong with my lungs, though. But that'll soon get better again. He has a coughing fit. I think the prospects are not good, and silently admire the poor devil's unswerving optimism.
It's funny that you're the one reading this, right?
Oh my God. Oh God. Oh my God. You're right. After dinner, I go to bed in a humble room. I hear how the other settles into his lodging for the night next door. He coughs several times, then he falls still. Suddenly I awaken again at an uncanny moan and gurgled mixture with a half stifled cough. I listen tensely. No doubt it's him. It sounds like something dangerous. I jump up and throw something on. I open the door to his room. Moonlight floods in. The man lies still dressed in his sack of straw. A dark stream of blood is flowing from his mouth and forming a puddle on the floor. He moans, half choking, and coughs out blood. He wants to get up, but sinks back again. I hurry to support him, but I see that the hand of death lies on him. He is sullied with blood twice over. My hands are covered with it. A rattling sigh escapes from him. Then every stiffness loosens. A gentle shudder passes over his limbs, and then everything is deathly still. Where am I? Are there also cases of death in hell for those who have never thought about death? I look at my blood-stained hands as if I were a murderer. Is it not the blood of my brother that sticks to my hands? The moon paints my shadow black to the white walls of the chamber, on the white walls of the chamber. What am I doing here? Why this horrible drama?
That's my favorite line right there. That is exactly what rock bottom is for me.
What is the line? What's your favorite line? What am I doing here?
Yeah, why this horrible drama? That's usually what people say when something unexpected happens, like you just out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, and there's always the unexpected. When I went for my degrees, I thought I was going to be something. I would be a lawyer or a business executive or what have you. And indeed, that's what happens when you take a degree. You get a job, you get one job. But then something happens. And if you live long enough, like I have, you get hit in the face plenty of times. And the point is you have to reinvent yourself. So all these, so now I'm teaching art in an elementary school for another 3 weeks at least. And if you had asked me in 1968 when I finished college if I would ever be teaching art, I would say you're certifiable, because I had never taken an art course, not a single art course, and I never took one later either, except in adult education. And so the whole idea of me being an art teacher is entirely preposterous. And yet I can draw a bright line between my Marine Corps career and what I'm doing now. And it's very clear. And the point is that you have to get all the education you can get, because it's going to make you more what I call seaworthy, your ability to reinvent yourself when the time comes, whatever it is, and to have a happy, fulfilling life. And I thank you, Judith. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I definitely. I think that expresses the Peter Pan story too, and not in the Peter Pan syndrome of, undeveloped little boys in grown men's bodies. I think the real Peter Pan story, Captain Hook kind of doesn't exist. I think Peter Pan's the enemy. He's the one who abducts children. And then I think he's looking in the mirror of his future self at Captain Hook. Where getting smacked in the face, you get a hand cut off, and you get the utility of a hook. You keep going. You get a leg cut off. You get a peg. You get an eye popped out, and you get a patch. Except what I think is interesting about the patch, and this guy here with the one eye, where's the other eye? Is that inner vision?
Well, and it's always taking something of value out of chaos. Okay, so the question came up earlier, and I sort of got distracted from it, but I want to come back to it now because Colleen Kubert is a Jungian of 60 years credibility. Okay, she's not an analyst, she's an artist, but she has developed the doodle. Okay, the doodle, and also we're currently developing this style called Rocky, and I've used both of these styles. Both of them take something from chaos, okay, and teach the children that something beautiful can be there. So in the doodle, the way I do the lesson is I give each child, and I've done this lesson from pre-K to 12th grade, okay, by substitute teaching in their art classes. And so it's a one-day, I teach it as a one-day lesson. And it's a 1 hour lesson. And so what I teach them to do is draw a line and then draw another line that doesn't like that line. That's the instruction. Now I want to give you a sense of what comes out of it. And
I think it's beautiful about that exercise is that line is the expected consciousness. And then the other line that is all around it is all the life around it.
Yeah. So here's some examples that I particularly like. This was a 7th grader did this, and I thought it was remarkable.
It's really pretty.
Yeah. And
Interesting.
I like the one on the plate.
Oh.
okay, now this was a 3rd grader, believe it or not, painted my portrait, and this is it. And at the time I had my mustache playing Carl Jung. And so then she drops the mustache down and creates a second face underneath the mustache. As you can see there, I thought that's amazing. And then
I love the way she had the eyes behind the glass. I mean, you could still see that it was
okay. And then
really
this
raw.
yeah, and then the part of the process is have 2 of them work on it. So the process was, this was 2 boys, and they had to change the piece that they were working on every 5 minutes. So this is what 2 boys put together, and this is what 4 girls put together, switching every 5 minutes.
Look at the community, community overlap. The identities are distinct. They're not becoming mud, but they overlap and influence one another. So that's about connection.
Okay, and so there's
Wow.
here's some more. Just quickly go through them. Okay, and this is one of our middle schools, which is I said, how can we have a middle school that looks like this? And that it looks like practice for prison.
Yeah.
Right. But
I remember when I was like 16 years old, and I went to Montenegro, which is my mother's homeland.
Yeah.
And my uncle, who just recently received an appreciation, an honorable appreciation for coming to the Vatican, and from Luxembourg, honorable appreciation, something like that. So for many years he has been painting, so I guess he's a painter.
Right. Okay. So then, yeah,
he told me to just paint, just keep painting.
Yeah.
And whatever comes out, that's your work. And
Well,
I had no idea that the contents of my unconscious mind or my subconscious mind I just painted different blocks of colors. And then suddenly I had painted the angel of death. And I was so shocked. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I see.
Right. So this is the Rocky style that I learned at spring break when I was in California. And this is a piece by Colleen Kibert. And it really impressed me. Impressed me as it looked to be a Chinese scene for me, but Colleen saw in it, therefore the name, a red ribbon runs through it. Colleen, who's 90 years old, saw this red ribbon as the red ribbon that is in a corset. And she says that every time that there's a red in here, it's every time she loosened her corset and she ended up with either a child or a new husband. and then I showed this on Easter Sunday, and Jordan says, "Oh, well, there's the three kings."
Well, yeah, totally.
Coming to the Christ child. So this is basically the idea that you can draw a random painting and get a lot of things out of it. And so in terms of connecting children with their creativity, what you do is you put down color randomly. You then have them put lines everywhere where there's a color boundary. Okay, that's what you do, and then images emerge. So I want to just show you some student work in this regard. Okay, let's see.
Yep. So basically, when you draw in the lines, the water then does the shaping.
It's yeah. I mean, you're just putting color down randomly. So
if you zoom in on that, because that's a good question, Amela, it's actually the color does the shaping, but then you draw the lines after it's dried.
Yeah, you draw the lines after, right? Okay, so I want to show you. I had a contest among my classes. The fifth grade. Here's the fifth grade. Okay, I had them do a mural, and the prize is a donut party, and the teachers from the fifth grade are going to vote, are going to decide which one is the best one. So here you can see some of the outlining has been done. All right, so that's the fifth grade. And then here's the fourth grade. I was astounded at how like they are. Okay, this is fourth grade, not putting the lines down as clearly. And then the third grade is this one. Okay, so that's the third grade. Now I want to show you some impressive ones here. All right, so I was asked to show some student work. Here's random color put down. This was a very clever one. And the little dots are made by salt, pouring salt on
Can you zoom
when it's
in,
wet.
really show the lines?
Yeah. Okay, so you can see where the color boundaries. This one is only just started, and they weren't quite getting it yet. But the raw material is quite beautiful and could be something amazing. Okay, so these are finished jobs. Okay, here's an amazing one.
I can't wait to show these to my uncle. But I don't even think he knows what day of the week it is. Because he had he was in a car accident and he got a serious head injury.
Yeah, let me see if I have to turn this one on the side maybe, but okay, so then so I had to share my own work. So I'm going to, all right, so this is my own doodle, okay? This is my own doodle. And I did this under Colleen's tutelage a few months ago, or a year ago. And then this is some of my calligraphy. All right, so then this is my own Rocky, and I just completed it yesterday. And so I put down color. It's I don't know, 18 there. It's 15 by 24 or something like that. And I call this one Great Blue because we have a lot of great blue herons here. And so you just start filling in the lines where the color boundaries meet, and all of a sudden you see something. And so this is a great blue heron fishing. Okay. And then here, okay, here I'm pointing out that in this one, 3 unique cartoon characters came out of this Rocky. Okay, there's one here, there's one right below it. This is sort of a benign figure, but these are very unique. You could develop a cartoon around these 2 figures for 20 years and you wouldn't be copying anybody else. And then if I flip it over, there's another one here where I'm pointing at the nose. This is the mouth, the eye is right here on the back of the nose, basically. And this is the top of the head here. But anyway, you start to see them. Then, okay, I call this banshees, but because there's between 1 and 200 faces in this image. And so I just highlighted 3 of them. Here's a little boy who has a flower growing out of his nose, and his father's there above him, and he's trying to explain himself why he's got a flower growing out of his nose. And here's his mother being benign, watching the festivities with the father. But I mean, you can make stories about all of them. As I say, there's about 100. There's more than 100 different faces in here if you look at it. Okay, so this is one of my more complete works. This is The Croc That Steals Time, and here you see the croc, the crocodile at the bottom, and of course it's Peter Pan's croc. And this is jungle parakeets. So the parakeets are obvious, but then you realize that there are all these creatures and other spirits down below them in the jungle. Let's see, is that all? I guess. Yeah. Okay, that's all I have to show at the moment. But the point is that the creativity comes not by putting down the paint and becoming some sort of trompe l'oeil artist. You know, we have cameras for that today. This is putting color down randomly, then drawing the boundaries and seeing what emerges. And as you see, they're very different, and you get very different ideas within them. And I kind of like this one. And I like the jungle parakeets too. But anyway, so that's how I'm teaching young people to access their creativity. Now, whether I'm right or not, I think I am. I think the woman that interviewed me for art positions on Friday doesn't think so. She wants me to teach children how to make a trompe-l'oeil instead, which I don't think that's what we're about. And the point is, do you make art because it gives you joy for your lifetime, or do you make art because you're making a living doing art? And at the same time, my sidekick in the school who teaches pre-K to second grade, and this week heroically made her 300 children make tie-dyed t-shirts. Every child
Nice.
made a tie-dyed t-shirt. Total
Yeah.
heroism there. But she says I could sell these Rockies. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. But right now I'm enjoying doing them as a further amplification of what I'm trying to do and think about.
I think you have 300 oak trees there that are in acorns, and you're helping them crack those acorns. They grow out and become what they are, instead of standing idly, lying prostrate to the powers that be.
Right.
You're actually opening them up to say, oh no, this is what I'm going to do. Thanks for your rules, but this is the way I'm going to go about it.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing that astounded me about this, and I'll just put up the 5th grade murals again, because Colleen teaches that this is an explication of the collective unconscious, which it clearly is. And what astounded me about this is how alike they are. Okay, this is 5 different 5th grade classes that did these, and I was really astounded. I mean, number 5 is the most different, where the kids put their handprints on it. Okay, so these are all handprints that they delineated. But they're pretty alike in many ways. And that really surprised me. And so now I've done a school mural Rocky heroically. Okay, I mean, we are heroes. So my sidekick and I put our names on this 24-foot piece of 90-pound paper. It's 3.5 feet wide by 24 feet. And then you can see how I had started. This is one day of putting color onto it. That was the first day. And I let every child in the school touch this thing, but only for 1 minute. I gave them each 1 minute to put color onto the piece. So I have 600 children, even from pre-K through 5th are on here. And this is before they started outlining. And you can see I've softened things up by raining on it a bit, so you can see where the water has extended there. Because I couldn't leave it like that. You wouldn't be able to see anything if I left it like that. So I did some adjustments on it. And this is what the final product sort of looks like before we started to outline it. And so this week I gave the kids one lifesaver for every image that they found in the school Rocky. And so far we've identified 207 images in the mural, and we're going to keep going on it in the coming week.
Wonderful. Skip, what kind of paint did you use or offer for the kids?
It's Saks liquid watercolor.
Mhm.
And it costs, for 8 colors, it costs $46 in 8-ounce containers. But here, these kids, psychologically, I've gotten the entire school. What the school doesn't understand is that I've now bound the entire school in a collective unconscious exercise.
Yeah. That's my kind of subversion. Yeah, exactly.
Don't tell
You
anybody.
didn't, yeah, you didn't just give them some mandalas to color in. You literally got them working.
Yeah.
Right. So now every child in the school has put color onto it. So everyone can say that they contributed to it. And I'm only allowing the 4th and 5th graders to identify images now, because the other day I said, well, in a 3rd grade, I said, well, if you find things inappropriate, let me know. And I'll also give you a lifesaver for all the inappropriate things that you find on it, because there is some graffiti on it now. And so what happened was they quickly started to draw inappropriate things on it so that they could get a lifesaver for finding it.
That's the capital. That's
right, exactly.
well, it's like that, you're giving them there's more than one way to skin a cat. And if you leave the cat alone, there are a couple more.
Right. So anyway, it's just been a giggle to do it, but the guidance counselor has asked me if they can put it on the wall for commencement. And so it seems
beautiful.
It seems
you're making school not a prison. You're making school a living experience for them rather than an incarceration to get through.
I meant to share with you folks. I have to share the school that I'm in, which is quite impressive. Okay, so you saw the earlier one, and this school is sort of the mirror image of that. Okay, so these are murals that are on the walls. This is the music part of the school.
That's better.
This is the gym, going into the gym. This is going into the cafeteria. Here's music. This is the cafeteria. This is a panoramic shot. Let me see if I can share it as panorama.
Skip, are both schools in the same town?
They're both in the same county. Okay, this is the music room. That's a mural in the back of a loft, and on the other side of the room is a digital music.
Why have they left the one school so oppressively white?
Okay,
Like
this is where I taught the mandala. And this is a trifold I made for a little demonstration. This is my colors. And these are mandalas that my kids have done. Anyway, so, I mean, you get, so it's making a silk purse out of a sow's ear, though, because the kids that are in this school where I'm teaching are all impoverished kids. It's a Title I school, and none of them really pay any attention to what's on the walls. But, imagine what they're going to experience when they go into middle school and they end up with those prison walls of the other school. That was a middle school that I taught in for a couple months.
Those white walls are enough to kill education all by itself. I mean, you walk in there, and I think you're going to go right inside and not come out. I mean, that's
that's
like
practice for
waving
prison.
waving your
Yeah.
hand in floral, watching it go
Yeah.
right.
All right. So anyway, it's been a fun digression, but I think I better read a little bit more here, at least get down to number 2. So we diverted when Amala said that this was her favorite statement. So let me go back to that.
The last line in that paragraph.
I'm going to reread that paragraph and the next one, and then we're going to call it quits for today. So here we go. Where am I? There are also cases of death. Are there also cases of death in hell for those who have never thought about death? I look at my blood-stained hands as if I were a murderer. Is it not the blood of my brother that sticks to my hands? The moon paints my shadow black on the white walls of the chamber. What am I doing here? Why this horrible drama? I look inquiringly at the moon as a witness. How does this concern the moon? Has it not already seen worse? Has it not shown 100,000 times into broken eyes? This is certainly of no avail to its eternal creators. One more or less. Death, does it not uncover the terrible deceit of life? Therefore, it is probably all the same to the moon, whether and how one passes away. Only we kick up a fuss about it. With what right? What did this one do? He worked, lazed about, laughed, drank, ate, slept, gave his eye for the woman, and for her sake forfeited his good name. Furthermore, he lived the human myth. After a fashion, he admired the wonder workers, praised the death of the tyrant, and vaguely dreamed of the freedom of the people. And then he miserably died, like everyone else. That is generally valid. I sat down on the floor. What shadows over the earth? All lights gutter out in final despondency and loneliness. Death has entered, and there is no one left to grieve. This is a final truth and no riddle. What delusion could make us believe in riddles? Any comments?
I think that, and then everything is deathly still. Right in front of it describes that white hallway in that school. And I think these 2 paragraphs show how life-robbing that kind of environment is. And he's playing this to bring illusion away and bring life in. I think, like Michelle earlier, the judgment is a prison. I mean, I think he's really that really struck home, because judgy is a delusion. That's you confessing something you don't like about yourself onto somebody else.
Yeah.
I mean,
I really like how I'm not sure if you've already read it. Everything is riddlesome to one who is becoming, but not to one who is.
mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of Simone de Beauvoir when she says, one is not born a woman, one becomes a woman.
Yeah. Okay. What I'd like to do is read to the end of this chapter. It's 3 more pages. We have enough time, and without really stopping, because I want to be in the anchorite next week, which is a big, important area. So I'll read on.
You want me to read for a while to give her voice a rest?
Yeah, in fact, yes, do that. And I'm going to take a brief break while you do. So
Okay.
We're at the beginning of part 2 on page 236.
We stand on the spiky stones of misery and death. A destitute joins me and wants admittance into my soul, and I am thus not destitute enough. Where was my destitution when I did not live it? I was a player at life, one who thought earnestly about life and lived it easily. The destitute was far away and forgotten. Life had become difficult and murkier. Winter kept on going, and the destitute stood in snow and froze. I joined myself with him since I need him. He makes living light and easy. He makes living light and easy. He leads to the depths, to the ground where I can see the heights. Without the depths, I do not have the heights. I may be on the heights, but precisely because of that, I do not become aware of the heights. I therefore need the bottommost for my renewal. If I am always on the heights, I wear them out, and the best becomes atrocious to me. But because I do not want to have it, my best becomes a horror to me. Because of that, I myself become a horror to myself and to others, and a bad spirit of torment. Be respectful and know that your best has become a horror. With that, you save your life. With that, you save yourself and others from useless torment. A man who can no longer climb down from his heights is sick, and he brings himself and others to torment. If you have reached your depths, then you see your heights light up brightly over you, worthy of desire and far off, as if unreachable, since secretly you would prefer, lost my place,
Not to reach it, since it seems unattainable to you.
there we go. Yeah, my screen zoomed and then I lost it. Thank you. As if unreachable, since secretly you would prefer not to reach it, since it seems unattainable to you. For you also love to praise your heights when you are low, and to tell yourself that you would have only left them with pain, and that you did not live so long as you missed them. You do not live so long as you missed them. It is a good thing that you have almost become the other nature that makes you speak this way. But at bottom, you know that it is not quite true. At your low point, you are no longer distinct from your fellow beings. You are not ashamed and do not regret it, since insofar as you live the life of your fellow beings and descend to their lowliness, you also climb into the holy stream of common life, where you are no longer an individual on a high mountain, but a fish among fish, a frog among frogs. Your heights are your own mountain, which belongs to you and you alone. There you are individual and you live your own very own life. If you live your own life, you do not live the common life, which is always continuing and never ending, the life of history and the inalienable and ever-present burdens and products of the human race. There you live the endlessness of being, but not the becoming. Becoming belongs to the heights and is full of torment. How can you become if you never are? Therefore, you need your bottommost, since there you are. But therefore, you also need your heights, since there you become. If you live the common life at your lower reaches, then you become aware of yourself. If you are on your heights, then you are your best, and you become aware only of your best, but not that which you are in the general life as a being. What one is as one who becomes, no one knows. But on the heights, imagination is at its strongest. For we imagine that we know what we are developing. We are as developing beings. And even more so, the less we want to know what we are as beings. Because of that, we do not love the condition of our being brought low, although, or rather precisely, because only there do we attain clear knowledge of ourselves. Everything is riddlesome to one who is becoming, but not to one who is. He who suffers from riddles should take thought of his lowest condition. We solve those riddles from which we suffer, but not those which please us. To that which you are is the bath of rebirth. In the depths, being is not an unconditional persistence, but an endlessly slow growth. You think you are standing still like swamp water, but slowly you flow into the sea that covers the earth's greatest deeps and is so vast that firm land seems only an island embedded in the womb of the immeasurable sea. As a drop in the ocean, you take part in the current, ebb and flow. You swell slowly on the land and slowly sink back again in interminably slow breaths. You wander vast distances in blurred currents and wash up on strange shores, not knowing how you got there. You mount the billows of huge storms and are swept back again into the depths. And you do not know how this happens to you. You had thought that your movement came from you and that it needed your decisions and efforts so that you could get going and make progress. But with every conceivable effort, you would have never have achieved that movement and reached those areas to which the sea and the great wind of the world brought you. From endless blue plains, you sink into black depths. Luminous fish draw you. Marvelous branches twine around you from above. You slip through columns and twisting, wavering, dark-leaved plants. And the sea takes you up again in bright green water to white, sandy coasts. And a wave foams you ashore and swallows you back again. And a wide, smooth swell lifts you softly and leads you again to new regions, to twisting plants, to slowly creeping slimy polyps, and to green water and white sand and breaking surf. But from far off, your heights shine to you above the sea in a golden light, like the moon emerging from the tide, and you become aware of yourself from afar, and longing seizes you, and the will for your own movement. You want to cross over from being to becoming, since you have recognized the breath of the sea and its flowing that leads you here and there without your ever adhering. Leads you here and there without your ever adhering. You have also recognized its surge that bears you to alien shores and carries you back and gargles you up and down. You saw that it was the life of the whole and the death of each individual. You felt yourself entwined in the collective death, from death to earth's deepest place, from death in your own strangely breathing depths. Oh, you long to be beyond. Despair and mortal fear seize you in this death that breathes slowly and streams back and forth eternally. All this light and dark, warm, tepid, and cold water, all these wavy, swaying, twisting, plant-like animals and bestial plants, all these nightly wonders become a horror to you, and you long for the sun, for light, dry air, for firm stones, for a fixed place and straight lines, for the motionless and firmly held, for rules and preconceived purpose, for singleness and your own intent. The knowledge of death came to me that night, from the dying that engulfs the world. I saw how we live toward death, how the swaying golden wheat sinks together under the scythe of the reaper, like a smooth wave on the sea beach. He who abides in common life becomes aware of death with fear. Thus the fear of death drives him towards singleness. He does not live there, but he becomes aware of life and is happy, since in singleness he is one who becomes and has overcome death. He overcomes death through overcoming common life. He does not live his individual being, since he is not what he is, but what he becomes. One, you mean to continue? You're muted, Skip.
We had an interruption. So I'd like for you to go back to the third to the last line, that the beginning of that sentence on page 239. He does not live there. Read from there, if you will.
Okay. He does not, I'll go one sentence back to, thus the fear of death drives him towards singleness. He does not live there, but he becomes aware of life and is happy. Since in singleness, he is one who becomes, and one has overcome death. He overcomes death through overcoming common life. He does not live his individual being, since he is not what he is, but what he becomes. One who becomes grows aware of life, whereas one who simply exists never will, since he is in the midst of life. He needs the heights and singleness to become aware of life, but in life he becomes aware of death, and it is good that you become aware of collective death, since then you know why your singleness and your heights are good. Your heights are like the moon that luminously wanders alone and through the night looks eternally clear. Sometimes it covers itself, and then you are totally in the darkness of the earth. But time and again, it fills itself out with light. The death of the earth is foreign to it. Motionless and clear, it sees the life of the earth from afar, without enveloping haze and streaming oceans. Its unchanging form has been solid from eternity. It is the solitary clear light of the night, and the individual being, and the near fragment of eternity. From there you look out, cold, motionless, and radiating. With otherworldly silvery light and green twilights, you pour out into the distant horror. You see it, but your gaze is clear and cold. Your hands are red from living blood, but the moonlight of your gaze is motionless. It is the lifeblood of your brother. Yes, it is your own blood, but your gaze remains luminous and embraces the entire horror and the earth's round. Your gaze rests on the silvery seas, on snowy peaks, on blue valleys, and you do not hear the groaning and howling of the human animal. The moon is dead. Your soul went to the moon, to the preserver of souls. Thus the soul moved toward death. I went into the inner death and saw that outer dying is better than inner death, and I decided to die outside and live within. For that reason, I turned away and sought the place of inner life. And footnotes 40 through 42. Jung cited beliefs in different cultures that the moon was the gathering place of departed souls. In Mysterium Conjunctionis, Jung commented on this motif in alchemy. And then he says, I accepted the rogue and lived and died with him. Since I lived him, I became his murderer. Since we kill what we live. Which is a wonderful way to say life is fatal. It's like, no one's getting out.
Well, yeah. I don't know that passage should be picked apart too much by us. I think we should just let it sit with us. Because
I like the perspective from the moon, though. I mean, it's a whole different way to look at things. And even when you're in a time of dark clouds, the sun is still shining behind the clouds.
Yeah.
So I love that the moon does not know the anguish or the death. And so I think in those times of, say, rock bottom, it's important for you to expand past what you can see, to make sure that your shift is is something that, your standard transmission. It's like you're rock bottom, stomp, stomp. Okay, yeah, but the sun's still shining. I am sad. I mean, engage, don't waste the trouble, and find the treasure in that trouble.
I saw it as like the moon being a phase, because the moon arises and then the sun arises. So they cannot, obviously, unless there's some kind of astronomical phenomenon, they can't both be there at the same time. It has to be one or the other. So it's this phase. And maybe that's what life is. Life is being born and then maybe rebirth when you are enlightened. And then when the time comes, we perish, we go on. But what happens afterlife, who knows?
Skip and everybody, I feel this passage was so, I think I'm going to just jump off now and be with these words instead of what people think about them, and even what I think about them.
Yeah, that's a good, just steep with them. That's a good.
I just
Enjoy
it and let them be not so known, but allowed.
Oh, before you go, I have a quote that I found.
Okay.
It says, "Ring the bells that can still ring. Forget the perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." By Leonard Cohen.
Yeah, I love that one. Okay, peace, Judith, and
Thank you, Judith.
and we'll see you all next week. I don't know. This has been a powerful day for many reasons. For me, I hope people don't mind so much me taking the excursion with the kids' work, but I think it's pretty meaningful in a variety of ways to see the collective in operation there.
I think what you're doing is actually pretty majestic. I mean, I think the thing is keep the kids connected and then try to reconnect the adults. Because, well, no, I mean, on the plaza several weeks ago, I mean, it was really windy. And I was just basically holding things down for a little while. And while a client was sitting there, and I said, let's pause. And right when I said that, this little girl, she couldn't have been more than 4 or 5, was walking with her dad, who was like 6'10". And so her hands, straight up in the air, holding his hand. Mm-hmm. And she tugs. We both looked over and she tugged on her dad's hand. And she said, "Dad, you feel sluggish." And I mean, immediately it's like, whoa, out of the mouths of babes. We both turned because who knows what's coming. He said, "Oh, it's the wind. It's just taking it out of me." She goes, oh, Dad, it's just, I'll go, "Don't worry. It's okay." And he goes, "Well, how and what? Why do you say it's, why do you say it's okay?" She goes, oh, Dad, it's big wind. Nature's just having to breathe a lot harder to birth spring. And,
wow.
I'm like, wow. I will never forget that, because then it put the life back in him. All of a sudden, he wasn't tired of her running around shopping and smelling all the flowers and wanting a popsicle and this. And he got right back. It put the life right back in him. And I think that connection of the children is so important. And I think with adults, we often try to riddle ourselves back into something. Whereas, like Judith said, I think I'm just going to steep with the words, make tea out of yourself. And I think that's what often gets us out of trouble. Instead of trying.
That's why I say the children already know everything. It's just a question of opening it up for them.
It's a form of self-care what Judith did, and I feel that should be validated, and we all have a choice on that. But something that really stood out to me again, everything is riddlesome to one who is becoming, but not to one who is. He who suffers from riddles should take thought of his lowest condition. We solve those riddles from which we suffer, but not those which please us. To be that which you are is the bath of rebirth. In the depths, being is not an unconditional persistence, but an endlessly slow growth. As a drop in the ocean, you take part in the current ebb and flow. And these are the things that stood out to me. Like, these are the notes that I took that have like this deep, very, very deep meaning to me, because when my grandmother died, I was not expecting that. I was very shocked because I thought that I was gonna go visit her and she would be making like Bosnian stew with like goulash and fresh bread. And when I went there, when I didn't go there and I was planning to go and visit her again, but then my father sends me a message like, your grandma's dead. And I'm like, really? In like the most masculine, the most gendered way, he says, your grandma's dead. He doesn't say like, oh, hey, honey, I'm so sorry, because he's in Slovenia. So instead of calling me and saying like, hey, I'm so sorry, honey, grandma has passed away, he just sends me a message like straight up, like, bricks on the wall, your grandma's dead. And I'm just like, and it took me so long to get over it. And then when my grandfather, her husband, my paternal grandfather, when he died, I was like, at this point, I'm just going to close this mentally by telling myself that my grandparents couldn't live without each other. So they're together in the afterlife or on the other side, like hanging out.
Well, I take it in a little different way, which is that nothing ever dies. Nobody ever dies. Yes, this physical creature doesn't go on, but all the people in my life who have quote unquote died are still with me in my heart. And that hasn't changed one bit since their death. I still feel my parents, my brother, as I did when they were alive.
That's beautiful.
And so, I don't worry about my own death, because lately I've been so exhausted that I just come home from school and I just go unconscious and, maybe wake up an hour later. I envision my own death as kind of that. There's nothing to fear in death itself. There may be reason to fear what happens before death, depending on what does happen. If you're in a horrible accident and your body's ripped apart and you're not quite dead yet, it might not be great, but in that case, death might be welcome. But
I just had this vivid dream where I thought that I was walking into her kitchen and she had the coffee ready for me with like biscuits, and I was preparing for her Bosnian hospitality. And then I woke up and I'm like, where's my Turkish coffee?
Yeah.
Like, what happened?
What I find interesting is Jamie Anderson's quote on grief. And she just says, grief is love with no place to go. And there's that point where the hand reaching out is no longer cupped by the receiving hand. So in a sense, there's a fading into the heart while the love finds a place to go.
I had more of like this guilt feeling because, given that I had that vivid dream, it's like we had unfinished business, like I have questions for you, Grandma. I have questions and now you can't answer them unless I get a Ouija board, which is haram. So, I can't.
I like your big question of where's my Turkish coffee? I mean, that's an important question. No, that's you got to get that.
I can get that anywhere
you
here
connect
in New York, but you know,
Yeah.
like just
Um,
that's solid advice of like her surviving like the Second World War and the Bosnian genocide and witnessing the horrific events that she witnessed, and then meeting my grandfather, this hero complex that came into her life, this uniformed Navy guy who's like, I'm here to save you. And,
Yeah.
you know, so I'm like, where does my story begin in yours? You know, like, are we intertwined in this? Like, what's the correlation here? Question.
Michelle, you were going to say something?
I was gonna say that when it comes to grieving things, like, the other person doesn't have to pass away. They could just be out of your life.
Sure.
You can have that final conversation on your end to achieve closure, to move on.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Because it's that final conversation that most people experience a lot of feelings over.
yeah,
I think
well,
that's a good point, because a lot of people say, oh, well, I need them to say they're sorry. No, you really don't, because they're not going to. And that's why they're out of your life. But if, like you said, if you have that final conversation with yourself and say what you need to hear, in a sense, you balance the equation and you move on. And then you realize what you needed was probably actually not so good for you. And then, but you take the bitter pill, but you have the conversation to finish the conversation instead of that abrupt cutting off.
well, I am facing termination of 300 relationships in 3 weeks' time because the school year is over. And the administration won't talk to me about whether they want me to teach art again next year. Or maybe I should put it as they don't talk to me about it, although I've given them plenty of openings to talk to me, but they haven't. And so I'm in the mode of having to assume that 3 weeks hence or 3.5 weeks hence, it's going to be over. And yet I know that there are some of those children, including some that have been behavioral problems with me, that are inevitably going to remember me for the rest of their lives. And not because I criticize them, because there's one young woman who has been sort of a consistent behavioral problem in my classes only. Her teacher tells me she's always very helpful and everything in her classes. And so I said, what did I do? And, I keep saying to this young girl, you're one of the smartest kids in this class. And I really would like to show you some things that would be very valuable to you. And she goes, like that. And
it sounds like she respects you so much, because now she's able to fight against you. So she's playing the modeling. I can grow up. So the conflict actually might be a compliment offhand.
Yeah.
Because of the other people, she'll learn and do her stuff, but she'll, color within the lines. But with you, she may be feeling her oats, and then either male.
She's surely feeling her oats, no doubt about that.
Yeah, and so it's not
it depends though, Jordan, because it could also be, the way that a person grows up, and their logos from their own experiences of like their family dynamics.
Oh yeah.
Or economic status. And I think it could probably be like trauma.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely think that's true.
Well, I think that's interesting too, that she acts, here's the thing, I think just generally that she acts differently in your class. So it's interesting because there's something about that is telling about her and about you that makes, I think, your class more important, because her trauma is able to pour out or whatever it is.
Yeah, maybe,
but
who
it's
knows?
giving her outlet. And I think that what's interesting is everywhere else, yeah, she'll get in trouble. With you, I mean, you play against a lieutenant colonel. Well, it's not a conflict to you; it's an interaction. And so, I mean, she's able to rise to her power.
So anyway, we're having a little bit of fun this week. So this week is going to be career week, and we were asked to put some photographs or something of ourselves in our other careers. And so I have this little collage that I made, and I put it on my door yesterday, and I said to myself, I give this a day to stay here untouched. And yet it made it all the way through Friday, much to my surprise. And there was, pardon, I'm going to share it with you, but all day long there were little kids coming up outside my door with my door open, saying, "Oh, this is him. This is him," and so on. So I'll show you the collage I put on the door here. It's kind of fun.
It's funny about career day. I'll wait till after the collage. But
okay,
oh wow!
So this is Skip as businessman, Marine, Arab Sheikh, father, and teacher. Different roles, and so my hair is cut to this length because I'm going to wear my uniform, that one, on Thursday, I think.
Oh, nice.
And,
it's funny. A friend of mine's daughter said, "Hey, Mom, career day is next week. Will you marry Jordan?" And she said, "Why?" Because how funny will it be to take a tarot professional as a job to school?
Yeah.
And I looked over and went, no.
So I'm considering whether I should wear my Arab dress one day. The one that's in that picture is white, but I have both Saudi and Palestinian as well.
Well, I love your story with the Arab dress about the men primping in the window, and and it's like a mirror glass to them, and all the women are behind the window watching.
That's right.
Cracking up laughing because they're all being, all this primping, like they're spending more time on that one hair than I do my whole makeup. It's like,
right. That's right. It's totally hilarious when in this one hospital, which is the National Guard Hospital in Riyadh, there's this mirror glass window that has the medical records department behind it, and so the men coming up to the main door can't see what's in there, but what's in there is all these women. And these men are coming up to this mirror, and they're all primping their shema. And the women are just hilarious, hooting. I'll just repeat that one again so you can see it again. But so here I've tucked my shema behind my head, but usually it can hang down or hang around. It's every which way but loose. And so anyway, I'm considering wearing this to school, but we'll see. I think I might see if I survive. I survive the uniform, and if I survive the uniform, I might do the other.
It's
it
so
up a notch.
funny. I never knew that my grandfather was in the Navy. He always told me that he was a gardener.
Oh, really?
And he
That
took
would be a
me-
Navy answer if you know
Yeah.
Navy people.
He took me to his garden, and he has like this huge piece of land where he has all these like exotic flowers from different parts of Europe. And he was talking about like foraging and the importance of bees. And I said to him, "Oh, that's everything that's in the Quran." And he told me, yes, maybe one day when you get old like me, you can have your own garden. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
That's too much work for me.
Well, that reminds me of the quote of I'd much rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. So it's like, that's very much a Navy answer. Oh, I'm a gardener.
Well, it appears I may have discontinued the YouTube session inadvertently, so I think we might as well call this to an end for today, and we'll see what happens in the coming week. It's ever an adventure for me.
Yeah.
No matter what I do, I have adventures. So anyway, peace.
All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.